Order of Commissioners meeting. Do we have any adjustments? Welcome, Commissioners. Welcome, Larry. Adjustments to the agenda? And I think we have some public comment.
Self-service.
Yeah, there we go. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we just go ahead and go into public comment.
Come to the table if they want to.
Yeah.
Sit at the table where the microphone will pick your voice up. So,
I don't want these things.
You can sit up here.
don't worry. It'll work.
That works.
Time's up. Thank you for...
Good morning. I'm Kevin Matthews, and I'm a educator, entrepreneur, and community advocate in Dexter, but I used to live in the Churchill neighborhood, and my family has friends there, and I talked to a lot of people there last year when I was running for county commissioner. I want to share some concerns from recent conversations around the HAXA project being planned near Acorn Park. My personal perspective is that HAXA is a valuable agency, does good and important work for the community, providing housing-related services to people who need a helping hand, and sponsors, HAXA's partner in the project, similarly is a valuable social service organization providing housing for people who would have a hard time getting it otherwise. For the good of both of these organizations and the ongoing good works that are being done, it's important, of course, for a public agency to operate with a high level of transparency, frankness, and build trust, especially around projects that can be challenging for neighbors. In the case of the project near Acorn Park, some of my concerns have to do with the zoning change that HAXA procured, apparently kind of on the sly, without a lot of neighborhood involvement, in a neighborhood that has a defunct neighborhood association, getting public agency deference from the city of Eugene, which did as close to just hitting it with a rubber stamp for the hearings officials I can see, creating a removal of a planned unit development overlay on a very unusually dense remaining pocket in the neighborhood, removing the planned unit development overlay, even though there had already been a planned unit development approved on that site, not an obstacle to dense development, then turning around to the neighbors, and in 2 public meetings that I've been to recently, telling the neighbors, or taking up a stance toward the neighbors, that we know this is a dense project, we know it's going to be hard having a 3-story building 10 feet from the property line, 3 stories looking in your backyard, but we're just following the development rules, and we're a public agency, we have to help these people, we have to do what we can do. Well, it hasn't been explained to the neighbors that the rules, a lot of the rules that involve both process and review, and both process review and content review of this project were just quietly taken away before HAXA came to the neighbors. So I haven't talked with a whole lot of people about this yet because it's complicated. Things are happening fast. News of the zoning change was just like whispered in the background at the first HAXA public meeting. So it's an emerging situation, but I think HAXA needs to find a franker way to communicate with the neighbors, and I think there needs to be a moment of review, not about whether this is a good kind of project to do, but about whether this is the right place to do it, and what are the real factors that go into this project. It's currently being fast-tracked in a very vulnerable neighborhood. Just because HAXA can get away with pushing this through very likely, doesn't mean AXA should do that. So how do we get to a place where we get the right level of review in the current situation where HAXA has already exerted its capabilities to fast track the process? And how do we do that in a way that creates a trusted process with Baker and Park and Churchill neighbors? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Matthews. Do we have any commissioner's response?
Is there any others? Suggest if there's any others. Is there any?
Oh, is there any other public comment? There is. It wasn't on here, so.
My name is Ian Houston. I've been a resident of this town for 34 years. I've been living in that neighborhood for that time. I grew up there, purchased a home there, and I've been involved in lots of different things. I'm a military veteran, served my country, I've served this town, I've served with law enforcement all over the country. And what's happening here, everything that's happening with HAXA, I don't even know what HAXA is, honestly. I'm kind of in the dark about it. And, we're not sure if it's a public organization, a private organization, or what's going on. And the fact that the county commissioners comprise the board of HAXA for the vast majority of it, and then are making all sorts of decisions a year in advance about my neighborhood and not bothering to tell us that there may be this sort of thing going in, as a public organization, as public officials, is pretty disconcerting. And I'm not as eloquent as my friend here, but I can tell you this: there's a very small but extremely motivated group in our neighborhood that is very upset about this. And we are going to stop it, no matter what it takes. And if that means that we have to do all sorts of petitions and raise all sorts of money, we're going to do that. And if that means, if this project goes through, then we're going to spend a lot of time figuring out exactly what happened here and who did what. And we're going to start recalls on the people who were involved in that. And we don't care, honestly, because it's your job to serve us. And we're angry at the job that you're doing, because it's pretty piss poor. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Houston. Do you have any commissioner's response? Commissioner Brozovich.
Thank you. I will note that I think the staff at HAXA and sponsors both recognize that some of the public notice that was done for this project was not done well. I've had conversations with both staff about that. They understand that the notice should have been more than 300 feet. It should have been more clear about what the project was and all that. So I think they understand that they made a misstep in how they did that. I will say, though, that I did land development for 29 years in my career. Whether or not you have a PUD overlay in an R2 zone does not change the fact that you can build a 10-story building up against a 10-foot from a property line. One only has to go up to Crescent Village to see similar development. PUD overlays only require additional steps in the process. Ultimately, you still have to meet the underlying zones requirements for density, and whether or not you were going through a PUD process would not change that. And in fact, I'm surprised, Mr. Matthews, I've heard you give testimony relative to changes in zoning codes and all that are meant to increase density year after year after year, and to have you concerned about following what the actual zoning is in R2 is surprising to me. But I will say that hopefully, as this project moves forward, that both sponsors and HAXA have heard from the neighborhood and are trying to deal with some of the concerns. I understand there was a second public meeting out in the neighborhood, and I believe there's probably more planned. And I'm sure that the director may give us a little report during his time under the administration portion of our agenda this morning. But I think hopefully that some of those missteps can be repaired. But both agencies have a long record of putting together some very solid projects that have been helpful to the community in the long run. And I hope we can, work something out that will eventually, be beneficial to both the community as a whole and the neighborhood as we move forward with this project. There's a lot of interest in it from, the state government level on down. And I think there's a lot of people now on the outside looking into the process and making sure it stays a little bit more open from now on. So I do believe, there were some past mistakes, but I don't think there was an attempt to do anything underhanded or in the dark of night. And I do believe that ultimately folks will see that both these agencies that are involved in this project are really trying to serve the community as a whole, and hopefully they can work over some of the issues, whether it's changes in the project layout or whether it's changes in AXA's the population that's going to be in the project. But I think ultimately you'll see them willing to work with the neighborhood.
Are there any other responses?
Sure. I'd like to thank the folks that came and comment. I wasn't able to make the very first meeting that the sponsors and AXA met with the neighborhood due to I didn't receive enough notice for the meeting. I knew it was taking place, so I couldn't adjust my schedule. I was able to attend the last meeting that was held at the sponsor site on Highway 99 to get a feel for some of the concerns, and I was I really felt that folks were able to speak to their concerns at that meeting. They were heard, and the architect and the different folks were engaged in trying to understand privacy issues, transportation concerns, street inadequacy, a lot of different components that I believe hopefully will be addressed through the process. They're going to try to do a better job in outreach to the citizens. I can't speak to the zoning process, as that's the City of Eugene process. I can't speak exactly to the City of Eugene's building codes that govern the process for the application. But I can speak to AXA. We've been informed that we've been partnered with sponsors and trying to locate a facility, and they explained at that meeting that they did a great deal of research in trying to come up with a piece of property to do this, and this piece of property was one of the few that were available that met their needs. So I believe that they'll be able to go through this process, honor the concerns, change windows, privacy, fencing, heights. There was some conversation about trees and sidewalks and different access pieces that hopefully through future meetings through the architectural process, those will be addressed.
Commissioner Swain?
Thank you very much. Well, first of all, Mr. Houston, thanks for coming today. The HACSA board is a public agency. 5 of the members are the elected 5 commissioners, 4 of whom are here today, 1 of whom is excused. And then the Board of Commissioners appoints the other 2, so Mr. Massengill and Ms. Rivas are the public members of the HACSA board. So to answer your question, HACSA is a public agency. We operate under the laws of the state of Oregon. We primarily receive federal funding for low-income housing, and that's the main purpose of HACSA. And that's it's governed by this board. And in the time I've been on the board, it is expanded from 5 members, the Board of Commissioners, to 7 members. So we have 2 public members because of changes in federal and state law. So with regard to this project, I'm hoping that because we haven't had a big discussion of this project at the board level, I'm hoping that the staff at HACSA at some point can give us a written report on what's going on with the project so we can be more informed. And each one of the HACSA board members has an independent duty to try to make sure that the organization runs efficiently and that we're able to deliver the services we're supposed to deliver. So don't hesitate to contact me or any of the other board members regarding anything that is involving HACSA, because it is a public agency. And don't be shy. I can tell you're not, but don't be shy about contacting the elected officials, either through public comment, which is pretty limited to 3 minutes, so it's not a big conversation, but telephone and email and letters are always appreciated as far as a way to kick off an opportunity for more discussion. My district is close to this area. It doesn't really touch on this area because it's not my district anymore. I used to represent that Acorn Park area, but not any longer. So I will say it does concern me because I'm close to it. I'm not the commissioner elected from that area, but I am interested in it. So if you have anything specific or anything in general you'd like us to try to do, please feel free to ask. We operate in a fairly direct fashion, that the agency, the executive director and the agency do a very good job, and we have a meeting once a month or two, once a month or maybe twice a month, and it's limited to a short period of time. That doesn't mean that individual members of the board can be an advocate and ask questions and try to help resolve conflict. And I'm hearing there's at least Mr. Matthews is mentioning that there's some transparency issues here, and I hope that we can continue to get to the bottom of it. The other thing is Mr. Mo Prohaisky is the county administrator, and I'll just mention this for his benefit, and that is in the other instances I've been involved with housing issues, and these weren't HACSA housing issues, these were convicts or people convicted of crimes, and then Lane County's parole and probation and Health and Human Services Commission was involved. So you might want to check to see what the level of involvement county government has in this, because oftentimes this is an integrated process, and it's not just HACSA, it's not just sponsors, it also may involve Lane County Health and Human Services, parole and probation, and agencies. So there may be some knowledge here because of some involvement of the county government. Thanks.
Thank you. Do we have anything else?
I just respond to Commissioner Sorensen. There will be, in my understanding, 2 parole officers that will have office space and function out of this facility.
So there may be budget issues of how much money we're involved in it.
You have another comment?
Yeah, just in a little bit of additional clarification, the legislature during its last session passed House Bill 3149, which was a Justice Reinvestment Act, which the idea was to try and keep people out of the prison system and take those savings and invest them locally in restorative justice. And that's where a lot of this project is generated from, because they increase the amount of earned good time you could get while you're in prison, so the releases are coming earlier. The population of post-prison folks is increasing in Lane County, the need for this, and then the funding that comes with that bill is part of what's generating this project. So there is county involvement in that. We are recipient of those Justice Reinvestment Act dollars, and probably that is a portion of that project in trying to prevent recidivism of this post-prison population. It is where that comes from. So it's actually a state legislative initiative, but the county is the recipient of the dollars, so that the funding does come through the county at some point.
Do we have any other comments? No. Any other issues or remonstrance? No?
What does that mean?
Oh, any other issues, or it's just if someone else wants to speak, yeah. The commissioner. Okay, do we have any emergency business? Okay, so we're going to move on to administration, and we have approval of the minutes. I'm not sure, 12, 17, 13, was that just one we didn't approve or something?
That was a mistake.
Oh, okay.
It should be October 28th, 2014, and January 13th, 2015.
Okay, so I did anybody get the October ones?
I think Sandy just realized the mistake this morning and sent them out. So maybe we can just approve the January ones and we'll
Go back on the October ones next time?
Yeah.
Okay, so are there any comments on the January minutes for discussion? Okay, so would someone like to...
I move approval of January.
Okay,
Second.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposition? No? Okay. Motion to approve has passed. Okay, so,
While we're in administration,
yeah, oh, do we want to have Larry?
Larry, do you have any comments or anything you want to tell the board about the Acorn Parks project or any other projects?
Yeah, I do agree with everybody who spoke that the process could have been a lot better. We're up against a deadline to apply for federal tax credits. The application is due next month, and really we had not intended to go in with this project this year. And as you know, we have two other major developments planned, one 6th and Oak and one in Glenwood. And for different reasons, we have delays on those projects. To our knowledge, there are no other applications going in from Lane County, and we feel that this is an important project. As you all know, we've worked with sponsors for over 20 years, and I'm very proud of our work with sponsors, particularly Roosevelt Crossing, where that meeting that Commissioner Stewart was at, we developed that, and they just do a great job, and it's a great need, and I really do apologize that everything happened so fast, but we do intend to. We've had 2 meetings with the neighbors. We intend to have more. We're taking into consideration all the comments about the design that were made at the last meeting. I thought that our architect did a really good job explaining and trying to present alternatives, and we're going to take that back, do some redesign, and then have another meeting, which should be very soon.
Thank you. No comments?
We'll be notified of the meeting.
Pardon me?
The board will be notified of the meeting.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Larry, so on the project itself, HACSA and sponsors would be kind of regarded as the project developer. So when you're going through the project itself, who eventually grants the permit? Who's in charge of the permitting process?
Well, it'd be the city of Eugene, to my knowledge.
So there's also obviously another avenue where the citizens can express their opinions is also with the city of Eugene, is that correct?
Well, I mean, that was a discussion earlier, and they had the hearing, and that was the time when, and several people did show up and express their opinion at that point. Just to clarify, HACSA would be the developer, sponsors would manage the project.
Right. Thank you.
So, just to clarify, who actually sent the notice out for that hearing? Was it the city of Eugene in accordance with their, because I've applied for things that require a hearing in the city of Eugene, and my past work with them was they actually sent the notice and we paid a fee for them to send the notice out.
I believe they sent the notice. I'm not sure about a fee.
Yeah, I believe that's the process. Just, what probably would have been helpful was if HACSA had maybe gone a little bit further than what the city required. The city will draw that 300-foot line and send only out to there because they don't want to spend any more money than their fees are collected for. So, and they word the notice, not HACSA. So, when we get into, I understand that there was some concern that the notice really didn't say what it was supposed to, really tell people what's going on. That wasn't HACSA's wording. My understanding is the city of Eugene actually does that. From my past experience, unless that's changed, that's who actually sent the notice was Eugene, not HACSA.
Yeah, that's correct.
All right. Do we have any other comments? All right. So at this time, turn the page here. We're going to recess our public meeting, and the HACSA board will meet in executive session to consider the employment of a public officer, employee, staff member, or individual agent. This executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-6602A, which allows the board to meet in executive session for the purposes listed above. We reserve the right to come back out into public session should the need arise. As we have no other business, and we won't be voting on anything in executive session, we may not need to.
The Lane County Board of Commissioners to order. It is Tuesday, February 10th, 2015, and are there any adjustments to the agenda?
I just want to pass one yet.
And I will note that Commissioner Farr is absent. He's in Washington, D.C. with our United Front lobbying effort, and he is excused today. He will be attending this afternoon's meeting by telephone when he gets free from all his lobbying efforts, D.C. time-wise. It'll be the evening. I think after a quick discussion of prior to the meeting, I am going to request to pull item 5D1 from the consent calendar and have a separate discussion of that item. Are there any other changes to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll move on to public comments. We have 3 folks so far signed up for public comment. If you'll come to the microphone, state your name and the city you're from, and then we will start your 3 minutes.
Hi, my name is Beverly Potter, used to be Hughes, and I'm the Director of Food for Lane County and the Chair of the Human Services Network, and I'm from Eugene. And I'm here to say thank you for the investment that you make in the Human Services Network. We really appreciate how you help strengthen the community. Just recently, I was volunteering at St. Vincent's Food Pantry, and a guy came in, he was making lots of noise like he was happy, so when he got to my station in the food pantry, I asked him why he was so happy. And he said, I got a job. And he was a union plumber who hadn't worked for a long time, lost his house in foreclosure, was getting food boxes to help him, but he finally got a job. And he said, this is my last time to be here. I just need some lunch meat from my lunchbox, and I'm going back to work. And I wanted to thank you for helping us show up in the community the way we do to help people when they have a temporary problem and they just need to get back to work. So thank you for all that you do for us, and on behalf of the network, really appreciate your investment in us. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next is Dennis Sandow.
Good morning, Commissioners and Chairman Bosevich. My name is Dennis Sandow. I reside in Eugene, Oregon. And from 2009 to 2014, I had the pleasure to serve on the Lane County Planning Commission. Today I'd like to talk with you about the January 27th presentation that you had from Matt Laird regarding the annual report to the board pursuant to Article 2, Section 3 of the Lane County Planning Commission bylaws. As you know, we met together between the Planning Commission and the board, and I remember that time fondly. It's probably the most productive time that I recall from a planning commissioner's perspective and making progress towards Goal 1. So I'd like to talk about Goal 1 in terms of shalls and shoulds. And I'll be citing a couple of sources here. To begin with, I'd like to start with the bylaws themselves. That's your order number 97-10-21-2. And it says that in the annual report to you from the Citizen Involvement Program Committee, as you know, it's a dual assignment when you're planning commissioner. You're also on the Citizen Involvement Program Committee. I didn't know that, by the way, until I was 2.5 years into my service. But with respect to Section 3, that Citizen Involvement Program Committee shall provide an analysis of how well the community's needs are being met, and it shall provide a report on citizen participation and suggestions for improvement. If we look inside of our Lane County Rural Comprehensive Plan general policies in Part 2 regarding Goal 1, citizen involvement, the Citizen Involvement Program Committee, which is your primary body to advise you with respect to citizen involvement, advises you with respect to citizen access to planning information, the effectiveness of the existing program, needed program changes or new program areas, and to comply with OAR 660-015-0001, which is Goal 1. Within that OAR, the Citizen Involvement Program Committee members shall be selected by an open and well-publicized process. They shall also be responsible for assisting you with the development of a program that promotes and enhances citizen involvement and evaluates the process being used for citizen involvement. If we look through the 6 areas of contribution with respect to financial support, we also see that adequate human, financial, informational resources shall be allocated for the citizen involvement program. Now we move into the shoulds. So these would appear to be discretionary. I suggest they're reminiscent of best practices. My time up?
Yeah, if you can just wrap up in it.
Okay.
Really.
Let me wrap up by saying that number 1, the report you received should not have come from staff. That report is designated in code coming from the Lane County Planning Commission. That should be an annual report that's authored by the commission, not by staff. The other thing I'd point out to your attention is that whether you go 2012, 2013, 2014, it's just a cut and paste. There's no feedback that you get around the existing program or program improvements. So I'm sorry to say that with respect to Goal 1, we're woefully out of compliance with Oregon land use laws, both at the state and local level. And with respect to lack of resources, I really can't accept that, because if you look at the Row River Trail Plan, also facilitated by Lane County, it's an outstanding example of citizen involvement. So, sorry for going over. I'll be back next time you meet, and we'll talk about this some more.
Thank you. And the last speaker I've signed up is Mike McFadden.
Good morning, I'm Mike McFadden from Eugene, and I just wanted to start out by saying thank you to Mr. Mokrahysky for your excellent presentation at the City Club. I really came away really informed and with an increased sense of confidence that someone who's really passionate and skilled is going to be handling those problems. And I want to extend that thanks to the board for choosing such a competent individual to take that task. And I also want to apologize for a lot of the times when I've come up before, I've been kind of adversarial. I've had a lot of criticisms, some of which may or may not have been deserved, but I sure could have worded myself in a little bit more respectful and effective of a way. And I pledge from here on out to be more constructive in my interactions with you all. But I'm really here this morning because I was inspired by your speech to talk about adverse childhood experiences. I'm a person who's really affected by that in my life, and I'm also a person who's been able to rise above those experiences a lot more than many of my peers who also went through those. But I want to just point out that there's this culture. It seems to me like, being a person who's gone through a lot of this, I have a lot of social handicaps from what happened to me. I have a really hard time interacting with people as confidently and effectively as many other people who haven't been through that, but I do my best anyway. But I've noticed that there's this prevailing mindset, it seems like, in culture, which I think would be really, exemplified by Miss Inkster, and Andy Clark calling people crazy and stuff like that. That when people are suffering from poverty or mental illness or any of these adverse experiences, there's this tendency to make fun of them or mock them or marginalize them based on what they're struggling with. And I think that, when we have people who are struggling, it represents, for the obvious reasons, there's costs involved with people who are struggling with mental illness, addiction, etc. out on our streets. But over the long run, when you think about all the different people from whatever their background who've had these adverse experiences, it's an economic challenge for the whole community, because what happens, is that people are either never get to the point of owning their own house or their own property or starting a business, or are far delayed in reaching that point. A lot of people who go through childhood abuse or foster care or whatever have a really hard time going to college and being successful there. So that represents a lower curve of salary, which represents in turn a lower amount of income tax that those individuals are able to contribute to the community. And then the property thing I mentioned, so I want to see a community where the county government doesn't work so much just for promoting business. I mean, I get the idea that the more successful business in the county is going to provide more revenue, create more success and more jobs for people. But we have to realize that there's people who, without help and proper, assistance, aren't really prepared to enter into like a higher functioning intellectual job market. And so when I heard you speaking about how this is going to be, we want to have the focus of our job market going into the future be more on, intellectual jobs, high functioning jobs. We need to not forget that we need to have jobs available to citizens of all skill sets and all levels, to provide, stability and upward mobility of some semblance to everyone. The jail issue is a big deal. We can't be using the jail as a social service center, treating illness and mental illness and addiction. And then, finally, you mentioned, you were really sensitive about the timber taxes and the large corporation taxes. You didn't really want to, or perhaps you really didn't have the answers for the public at that point in time. But you made the statement that to whom much is given, much is expected, and I firmly also agree with that. And so looking forward, I think that when you're looking at road fees, you're looking at ways to fund many of these financial difficulties the county's facing. You need to find ways to lessen the impact on the most marginalized in our society, because all that does is either put people further behind or slow their progress to becoming more successful. So thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that wanted to address the board today? Seeing none, we'll move on to Commissioner's response to public comments and/or other issues and remonstrance. Any remonstrance from the board? Commissioner Stewart.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask Mr. Sandow, is there a way you can send your public testimony to me via email? You stated off some statutes and that I'd like to follow up on if possible, please. And just to address, appreciate, Mike, your testimony today, and I believe you've been here when we've had testimony from our Human Services Network. I think myself, and hopefully I speak for the board, we understand that it's a complete system and that we try to understand that people need. It's like Mr. Mokahiski has included in the site for our rest stop over there that we have availability to his services to try to help those folks that are needed. I think one of the things that we challenge, that we're super challenged with, is that the fact that the need at all levels is so great. And how do we focus and be effective and do the right thing is the challenge that we have in trying to lift everybody up. So I understood your comments. I appreciate them, and hopefully understand that we do have a huge system that provides all these different levels of care and assistance to ultimately lift people up. It's just that sometimes we're challenged with the need that's out there.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Thank you very much. I wanted to thank everybody for coming for public comment, and I really appreciate hearing about these topics. I guess I would echo the request for Dennis, our former planning commissioner. If you could maybe send that email to all the commissioners, that would be helpful, particularly the statutory obligation for the involvement, and also the lane code citation about the committee versus the department presenting the report. And then do you have an email address? Because you come here a lot, and I want to know if you have an email address. Okay. I just want to invite you to send an email to the Board of Commissioners when the board isn't meeting or when it's not time for public comment and when you have ideas, because I think we used to have a process where individuals in the public could suggest times and suggest ideas for board meetings in a more formal process of providing what might be called a citizen proposal for an agenda item, and we don't have that anymore, and that's maybe a separate topic. But one thing that's related to it and can kick that off is that if the commissioners and Mr. Mokrzycki and Mr. Dingle, the people that are involved in setting the agenda and helping the board chair set the agenda, if they receive that information, and one way is that what you do, come here and present that, but another way is through email. I would just recommend that you try to use as many of these communication techniques as you can. It is hard to make appointments with us because we're very busy, and but I do think it's helpful sometimes to use email as a way of contacting us. I just want to make that suggestion. Thank you.
Thank you, and I want to thank everybody for coming for public comment today and for your patience in waiting for us to finish the Housing Authority meeting. Got a little bit lengthy because we had public comment up there that was addressed also, and as well as having an executive session. I just real quick want to say that although the report from the Planning Commission was presented by staff, it's the involvement in writing it is by the Planning Commission, and they actually vote to adopt it. So it is technically their report. I think one of the things maybe I will suggest to staff next time is actually having the chair present at the time that's presented and have the chair do part of that presentation so it doesn't appear to be staff's report. I do know that the report does list the number of people that actually testified and attended every Planning Commission meeting, and notices, talks about how much notice was mailed out and some of the other public involvement outreach that was done. But I welcome the opportunity to take a look at some of the improvements there. Mr. Sandow, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, was here when I scheduled that joint work session to talk specifically about Goal 1. And one of the changes we have made is we advise anyone applying for the Planning Commission that they also are the Citizen Advisory Committee for Goal 1 under the way we've arranged that in Lane County, and that's something we actually ask them if they're aware of and make them aware of that obligation when they're making their application to even be on the Planning Commission. So there's no one that can say now that's a recent appointee that they weren't aware that that's one of their duties. So we're trying to address that, and I appreciate Mr. McFadden's comments around some of the joking. I was one of the few people probably that was not a fan of the Seinfeld show. In fact, I hated it at the time it was out because of the interaction between the characters. I love Seinfeld's situational stand-up comedy and his description of everyday life and all that, but the interaction between the characters there was purely about cut-downs and one-upping and very derogatory and making fun of people. And I watched my work environment change as that show got popular, and the younger kids that were, in the 20-somethings that I was managing as a 30-something become the Seinfeld characters in cutting down each other and all that. It was probably one of the most detrimental television shows to culture, I thought, at the time. And I'm probably one of the very few people that has that observation, but that tendency to make fun of people because they're different and to belittle them, I think is echoed sometime in our popular culture and promoted in some ways as being clever. And I understand your concern there, and I hope it's a natural tendency in some ways, and I hope sometimes I'm able to control that myself, although I'm sure I'm guilty of it at times. So I really appreciate your comments around that, and I hope we can all kind of hold ourselves to a higher standard. So with that, we'll move on to the consent calendar, and I pulled the last item, the consent calendar, for further conversation. So is there Commissioner Stewart?
Mr. Chair, I'd move approval of the consent calendar as amended by pulling item D1.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor of the consent calendar, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It passes unanimously with Commissioner Farr excused. And now we'll come to item D1, and the Sheriff's Office unfortunately wasn't tipped off that we were going to pull this, so I don't know if there's any staff here that can talk to this, but I have pulled up the background on it in particular, and wanted to look at what exactly, this is a very large grant application to Homeland Security, of which the Lane County Sheriff's Department is only a small portion. There's monies going to over $500,000 to Eugene Police, $300,000 to Springfield Fire, almost $60,000 to Lane Fire Authority. There's cities of Bonita and Crestwell that are applying for money to do emergency action plans. Additional money to the city of Springfield. The Lane County Sheriff's Office portions of the grant amount to about $170,000 total out of the $1.2 million, almost $1.3 million in this grant. And I'm noticing that under the particular item that was brought up as a concern by a citizen prior to our meeting is item 2, which is some tactical $87,000 worth of equipment for the special response team, which basically most people call SWAT team.
I didn't want to cut you off, Mr. Chair, but I wanted to let you know that we're working on getting Linda Cook here, so if you'd like to take up other items, then we can come back to that when we have a representative from the Sheriff's Office to answer questions. We'd be happy to do that.
That'd be excellent, because I understand the question about the long-range acoustical device and night vision goggles and how they'll actually get used would be good to hear directly from the Sheriff's Office. I can only add supposition to that. So with the agreement of the board, we'll wait till a little bit later when we get somebody from the Sheriff's Office here, and maybe we can move on to some of our other business of the morning here, which I will note we will go into executive session at the end of the morning session here, which is first County Council announcements from County Council.
The only announcement is your exec session, as you say, later this morning on a workers' compensation matter. Lisa Lacey will probably be there, presenting it primarily. Either I or Steve Dingle, if he's back, will be sitting in as well.
Thank you. Moving on to county administration announcements.
Mr. Chair, Commissioners, just a couple things. The individual from the formerly from the Planning Commission that spoke referenced the Raw River Trail, and I had the opportunity a couple weeks ago to take my daughter out there and then go cycling myself on that trail, and it's just an incredible asset to have a 30-plus mile off-road paved trail for families and outdoor recreation enthusiasts. So was glad that was referenced. I also want to share on the consent calendar today, the board approved a contract with Tia Kreff. We went out and did an RFP for a 457 deferred compensation plan. This is a benefit that we provide to our employees. That for most of our employees is they make their own contributions into this retirement plan, so they take money out of their paycheck pre-tax and put it in there, and it allows for investment into different assets and earnings for retirement. We went through an RFP process and selected a new vendor for that, and we're really pleased that we're going to lower the fees and just provide another benefit at no cost to the taxpayers as a result of that change. So we're pleased with that, and I want to thank Mary Miller, who's not here, but Marcia Edwards, our HR director, and Mary Miller, our new benefits manager, did an outstanding job with that effort. And want to share with you also on the budget front, as we're continuing to work through the development of the fiscal year 15-16 budget, and I'm not going to get into it, we don't exactly know where we sit, and we're still waiting certainly for Congress to take action on payment, a one-year payment, hopefully, for secure rural schools. As we said today, we don't have those funds. So our budget for next year will shape up largely around that dynamic of whether or not we receive that one-year payment. But our departments continue to enter their budgets in under the directives that were established by the board at our kickoff leadership meeting. And I wanted to just share that we're really focusing, I want to focus as much as anything on looking at our internal cost drivers and trying to control things like health insurance in particular. We've had our health insurance increases have been less than they had been projected to be, but they're still increasing at about 7% for next year, and so that's a significant overall cost for us, and we're going to do everything that we can, and I'm really excited with our HR staff, with Marsh Edwards and Mary Miller and all of our human resource staff. We met as a team last week and talked about the opportunity to dig into our health insurance costs and how we fund those, and not the benefit package as much as controlling our claims and reducing that cost so that it benefits taxpayers, it doesn't negatively impact our employees, and it doesn't, hopefully, will allow us to preserve some of the services that we provide there. So just want to provide that nod to our human resource staff, who's doing an outstanding job, and it's one of the great things about having folks who've been experienced and in the organization for many years, and then bringing in new talent, that we can have a really balanced team like that. You can tackle issues that you may not have been able to before. And finally, I was going to make a comment about the City Club, and Mr. McFadden noted that. I'm glad that somebody watched it and paid attention, and really appreciated the great comments and the forum that's provided. Both Springfield and Eugene have City Clubs, and we've gone around to the Rotaries and Kiwanis and Chambers throughout Lane County over the last several months, and talked about roads and public safety, the great employees that we have here. We've talked about mental and public health, which have been big topics more recently, economic development, poverty and homelessness, and I just really appreciate that we have such an engaged, so many engaged residents who are interested in the things that are happening in our community and want to ask questions and be informed, and they're willing to listen to information, and that's certainly, when we talk about the road funding issue, that's what we're asking for, is that we pursue a conversation with the community about the needs of the community. So that's that, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Commissioner Sorensen.
Steve, I wasn't able to make the City Club presentation, City Club of Eugene presentation. I will say that I am a proud charter member of the City Club of Eugene, and I think that when it was proposed years ago, the idea of having a place to have some community dialogue and unencumbered by, the rules of any particular government, and just have an open forum, I think it's really turned out quite well. Also, there's a tremendous partnership between the City Club of Eugene and Lane Community College and the KLCC radio station, because on Monday night, and this is a direct promotional comment, on Monday night there's a rebroadcast of the City Club of Eugene Friday lunch program. So at 6 o'clock Monday night is the rerun of what actually went on. I think it can be very valuable for the public. Also, it's available on the KLCC website to get that. So I think that what I was able to listen on last night was really good, and I appreciate your willingness to speak there. And then a few years ago, the City Club of Springfield was started, somewhat patterned after the City Club of Portland, or the City Club of Salem, or the City Club of Eugene, and same concept. And I hope you get a chance to talk to theirs if they have time.
Yes, thank you, and I did have an opportunity a couple months ago to speak to the Springfield City Club. Last thing I would note is that we're doing these videos that we post online, what are we calling, Lane County Update videos. They're about 10-minute long videos. We just did a new one. Commissioner Bozovich was on there, and we talked about road funding, road maintenance and funding issues. We talked about public health issues and resiliency and sort of the kickoff to 2015. You can find those on our website. On the homepage at lanecounty.org, and every few weeks we'll post a new video and just an opportunity to give people a rundown of what happens here, the actions that the board takes at each of their meetings from a broad perspective, and then we dig into some important issues that we're facing. So we'll keep posting those and encourage people, if you have 10 minutes to spare, go online and take a look and get informed about what we're doing.
Thank you. Any other questions for the administrator? And I see we have a representative from the sheriff's office here. Are you ready to jump in, or you want us to give you a few more minutes? Okay. Then we'll move on to commissioner's business first. So, commissioner's business, any announcements from commissioners? Commissioner Lyken.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And first of all, I want to say thank you very much for allowing me to miss last week's meeting. I really appreciate that. I actually was in Salem 3 times last week, which I wouldn't recommend any folks. But anyway, I do appreciate it. I was there on not only on behalf of Lane County, but also on behalf of Associated Oregon Counties dealing with transportation issues. As you know, I serve on the Bike Ped Planning Committee, so we're planning out a bicycle pedestrian piece for the transportation system for the next 20 years. But the other one was the road user fee task force and how that's going. And really what's interesting is that when we get the conversation, or folks ask about why we aren't putting forth a gas tax or why we didn't consider a gas tax for a possible referral, this is really potentially a real good reason why, because the idea that the state of Oregon is looking at is potentially replacing the gas tax with a road user fee. And again, it's a little bit more than in its infancy stage. They're moving to the what I call the second piece of the pilot, and that is July. It'll be hot with approximately 5,000 volunteers, at least that's their goal, and really get an idea if this is going to work. But I think what's important here is that Oregon's not alone. Oregon's formed a 10-state coalition on this, mostly western states, and that is Washington, Oregon, California, Nevada, Idaho, Utah, Arizona, Colorado, jumps Wyoming, and jumps New Mexico, but Texas has actually become a part of this coalition as well, which I was somewhat surprised. And I think because of the struggles with looking at how to finance your road system. So again, I say thank you very much for allowing me to miss last week to work on these issues, and also to begin lobbying the legislature on a potential transportation package. And so that's currently in discussion. Where that goes in the future, we don't know, but know that AOC is going to be clearly involved in this process as we go through. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for allowing me to, again, thank you for allowing me to miss last week's on behalf of trying to do work not only in Lane County, but for our association.
Thank you. Commissioner Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a couple items. The first, yesterday during the AOC Public Lands meeting, we had a guest from Senator Wyden's office, Mary Gaudreau. She wanted to report that they're working hard. Their focus is on a secure rural school renewal. They have prepared, I believe, a 1-year, a multi-year, and also a permanent SRS payment bill that they're working to try to gather support for and get co-sponsors for. So they're hopeful to introduce that fairly soon. So I think it was expressed that, you know, commissioners are on edge. This is something that really hopefully can happen fairly quickly as we're headed into budget cycles. So wanted to report that. The second item is I received a phone call from Mayor Tom Monroe from Cottage Grove. He wanted to share with me that on Thursday at 2 p.m. They will be dedicating a park in Cottage Grove off of Row River Road next to Woodson Bridge in honor of recognizing Lindsay Haskell, former city councilor and planning commissioner for the community. He's about 2 months ago was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and so the City Council wanted to recognize his contributions to the community and are doing so Thursday. So folks have met Lindsay and know him. I know the mayor would love to have you down to that dedication on Thursday, 2 p.m. in Cottage Grove.
Any other announcements? Thank you. We move on to agenda team requests, work session requests. Any requests for agenda items from the board? Commissioner Sorensen.
We talked about the National Defense Authorization Act. What was the, how are we handling that?
What we asked at that time was to bring it up in March 6th when all 5 commissioners are here. And
Okay.
we would decide whether we're going to move forward with it at that time because it looked to be a locked vote last time. And Commissioner Lycan wasn't here for part of that discussion. I'm glad you brought that up, though, because one of the things I'd like to, I'm not quite sure, I'd like the board to get 3 head nods, maybe to refer this to the legislative committee. We got a copy of an email from Colin Farnsworth, the director of People Against the National Defense Authorization Act, asking for help and assistance in lobbying Salem to take state action, which may be the more appropriate venue, seeing the state can fall back on the 10th Amendment and their ability to utilize the 10th Amendment to nullify federal law versus our inability as a county to utilize the 10th Amendment in such a way. And I was wondering if we could refer that to the legislative committee to bring back to the board a recommendation to support their efforts in Salem. If I could get 3 head nods, we can move that to legislative committee.
I'm certainly supportive of it, Mr. Chair. I was just curious, being we have passed a resolution encouraging both the state and our federal delegation to be active in this matter. I think it's appropriate that we at least in the present time forward that resolution on to our delegation in Salem, and then also have a discussion about possibly trying to be active with our lobby effort to if a bill or in the drafting of the bill.
I just wanted to make sure I wasn't overstepping as an individual commissioner or the board's authority to authorize lobbying, so that's the only reason why I was referring it to legislative committee. But I do believe we had already more or less made that statement and could support that. And nothing stops any of us individual board members from lobbying and passing on our resolution to our delegation, our prior resolution. If we're going to actually have staff support this, I think it probably should come through legislative committee if there's going to be staff time. So that was my only reason why I was bringing it up at this time. So we'll put that on the legislative committee's agenda for the next time they meet, and then it'll probably come back to the board for formal support of that effort. I will continue supporting the effort individually and try and remind our delegation of our past resolution, and I would suggest the rest of the board members do so also. Any other agenda team requests or work session requests at this time? Seeing none, I haven't seen anyone come back up from the sheriff's office. Do we want to deal with that? Mokrajewski.
Linda Cook is on her way. She'll be about 15 minutes from now. So either we wait, which doesn't seem feasible, or we can take it up at the end of the day after the afternoon session.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'll look to my other commissioners. We do have executive session we need to deal with this morning also. And I do believe that it would be beneficial to the public to hear exactly how some of this, what I would call, could be used for military purposes. Equipment is going to be utilized in the civilian police force publicly. It would be at the interest of the public. So I think at this time, I think, unless there's objections to the board, I think we can recess into executive session, reconvene this afternoon at 1:30, and then handle that item that was pulled from the consent calendar at the end of the agenda. Likewise, if there's any action items that come out of executive session, we'll tag them on to the afternoon session, so we won't be coming back into session this morning at all. We'll recess into executive session and then reconvene into public session at 1:30 today. And at this time, the Board of County Commissioners will meet in executive session to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. The executive session is held pursuant to ORS 192-660-2H, which allows the Board of Commissioners to meet in executive session for the purposes listed above. And we will come back into public session at 1:30. So with that, we will recess until 1:30, and we'll meet upstairs in the Board of Commissioners conference room in 5 minutes for executive session. Thank you.